And you might say, Charlie, do you support or oppose this? I support President Trump. That's my answer. I know the man. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the man for the hour, and he's had the weight of the world on his shoulders. So in a situation like this, I support my friend, and he's had my back and I have his. That's my perspective. By the way, I also look at this and I say, and I understand the arguments of people that, don't intervene and all that. I get it. But boy, have we not exhausted so many diplomatic channels and options. Here is Netanyahu, 261, praising and congratulating President Trump. Play cut 261. And you might say, Charlie, do you support or oppose this?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show, and we're on the For Liberty Network. Good morning, Pineapples. Too Easy, Swift Justice, what's happening? Southcott's here with us. Kermode Bear, Joni Rankin, T-Mill. How are we doing, everybody? Good morning. Willis, FX88. Nice to see C.O. Day. Coyote. What's up, Matt Unruh? How we all doing, guys? You ready to start the show? Let's do it. Charlie Kirk is dead. He was 31 years old when he was assassinated by a leftist. He built the largest conservative campus organization in America from scratch. And 6 months after his assassination, the organization that he built is eating itself alive. This week, the University of Arkansas chapter of Turning Point USA walked out. They said that the organization has become, quoting their own president, consumed with metrics, chasing relevance, and using Charlie's name in ways that feel disingenuous and manipulative. And last night, Joe Kent went on Tucker Carlson and claimed that Charlie Kirk personally told him to stop a war with Iran, which would be a remarkable claim from anyone, but it's an especially remarkable claim from a man who is currently under federal investigation for criminal leaking. So now we have conspiracy theories, staff purges, a widow CEO who was voted in 8 days after her husband's funeral, Candace Owens alleging Mossad involvement, a flagship chapter walking out, and a congressman making posthumous claims about Charlie Kirk on national television while under criminal investigation. Was TPUSA ever a movement, or was it always just a brand? And now that the face of that brand is gone, is there anything structural left? We're going to find out this morning at 8 a.m. when Camelia Peterson joins us to discuss that. But first, two other stories that you need to understand. The governor of New York went to a podium last week and said, go down to Palm Beach and bring them home because our tax base has become eroded. Oh. Where is my Maury Povich face? The governor of New York asking someone to drive to Florida and recruit the millionaires back. New York lost $111 billion in net income in 1 decade. Florida gained $196 billion. The math is not complicated. Freedom wins every time. Today we'll show you exactly how and why. And Elon Musk promised $2 trillion in savings. He held up a chainsaw, and then a DOGE staffer sat in a deposition chair under oath, and a lawyer asked, did you reduce the federal deficit? He said, no, we didn't. The government fired 271,000 workers and spent $248 billion more than the year before. Today, we tell you the truth about what DOGE actually did and what Javier Milei in Argentina did differently that is actually working. Plus, 2 terrorist attacks one day, both stopped not by police, but by the people on the scene, free-loving Americans with their Second Amendment rights. JD Too Chilly from Reason Magazine is here on why that is the whole argument when it comes to these things. I'm Austin Peterson. This is the Wake Up America show. Let's go. We've got bonus content for you today. Would you like to see our mini documentary? We've been doing a bunch of great mini documentaries about some of the heroes of the American Revolution. If you'd like to see today's, all we have to do is raise $100 in Rumble Rants gifted subs, or you can go to forlibertyshop.com and make a purchase this morning. If you haven't stocked up on Founding Flavors coffee in a while, today's a good day to do so. Head on over to forlibertyshop.com during the show, and you will help to unlock our mini documentary. Yesterday was funny because Joel Ledamore, he's a subscriber to our coffee, so he gets it every month on an automatic delivery. But because he set up his subscription during the show, it counts a month later when his coffee subscription renews. It's exactly during the live stream a month later. So that helps to unlock the bonus content. So if you want to get ready to help us to build up our network and unlock bonus content and do so on the regs, then setting up your automated coffee order for a monthly basis at this time during the show, that will help you to everything and everyone. All right, guys. So yeah, it's the spring of 2020. The world is just shut down. Every business in America is being told to close. Every worker is being told to stay home. And in Alameda County, California, health officials have ordered the Tesla factory in Fremont, which is the only car plant in the state, to stay dark. Now, Elon Musk is not the kind of man who takes that quietly. On an official Tesla earnings call with Wall Street analysts on the line, he calls the shutdown orders fascist. Thank you, Elon. He says he will reopen the factory regardless of what the county says. And then he says something that nobody in California takes seriously. He says Tesla's going to move. In California, they laughed at him. They've heard this threat for 20 years from every wealthy person and every major company that ever got annoyed with a tax bill or a regulator. The threats never materialize. The money, it always stays. But Elon Musk is not like the others. In December of 2020, he quietly changes his personal residence. He leaves Los Angeles, where he had lived for 20 years, and moves to Texas. It's not a vacation home, not a second address. He's gone. Analysts estimate he saved approximately $2.5 billion in capital gains taxes from that single decision. Now, California at the time, they're still not panicking. But then comes October 7th, 2021. Tesla is holding its annual shareholders meeting, but not in Silicon Valley, not in Palo Alto, where Tesla has had its headquarters since the company was founded. The meeting is happening outside of Austin, Texas, at a half-built gigafactory on the Colorado River. No walls, no finished floors, just steel, concrete, and cranes. And in the middle of it all, Elon Musk announcing that Tesla is moving its headquarters from Palo Alto, California to Austin, Texas. On December 1st, 2021, the SEC filing is official. One of the most valuable companies in the history of the world has just walked out of California. And he's not done. Less than a year later, October 26, 2022, he walks into Twitter headquarters in San Francisco carrying a porcelain bathroom sink. He posts the video himself. We all remember it. Smiling, he's laughing, and he tweets 4 words. Let that sink in. Now, what a beautiful day it was. Within 2 years, Twitter, now X, would be headquartered in Texas. SpaceX would move from California to Texas. The Boring Company, Texas. 5 companies, 1 man, all of them gone. Now, fast forward to just last week, March 11th, 2026. The governor of New York is at a podium in Albany, and she says this.
And being conscious of the fact that I need people who are high net worth to support the generous social programs that we want to have in our state. Right? Now, there are some patriotic millionaires who stepped up. Okay. Cut me the checks. I mean, just if you want to be supportive, but maybe the first step should be go down to Palm Beach and see who you can bring back home, because our tax base has been eroded. So I philosophically don't have a problem. It is like I have to look at the fact that we are in competition with other states who have less of a tax burden on their corporations and their individuals. And I would say remote work changed everything. There were people who could only work in an office in Manhattan or work in New York State, and they were captives to our state. They were going to stay. We saw that that's not the case. I mean, you know, Wall Street businesses looking at Texas, they're not going there because they have a nicer governor. I know that for sure. But they're going there because of the tax rate. We have to be smart about this. But we...
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Know your enemies. Go down to Palm Beach, she says, and bring them home. If there's any patriotic millionaires out there, won't cut me a check. What's with all of the socialist lefty billionaires not cutting checks? The governor of the state of New York is asking someone, anyone, to drive to Florida and recruit the millionaires back. Elon Musk looked at California and said, let that sink in. Kathy Hochul looked at New York and said, where did everybody go? That's the difference between a state that understands what it is doing to itself and a state that just figured out that it has a problem. I'm Austin Peterson. This is Wake Up America. Click the like button. Today, we're going to show you exactly what happened in dollars, in data, and in names. If you enjoy the Wake Up America show, click the follow button. In theory, you're supposed to get a notification when we go live, but everybody in the Rumble chat says they don't get a notification when they go live. I've heard other Rumble people complaining about this as well. Let's see if we can figure out some way to make sure that we're all here in the right place in the mornings, okay? But before we do, let's talk about what's actually happening to New York, because I want to make sure you understand the scale of this before we really get to the good part. So the New York City Comptroller, not a conservative think tank, the city's own chief financial officer, officially projected a $2.2 billion budget shortfall for fiscal year 2026. And then New York has a $10.4 billion gap for next year. The city's new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, who is a Democratic socialist, which is a whole other show, held a press conference and said, quote, I will be blunt, New York City is facing a massive fiscal crisis. There's a massive fiscal deficit in our city's budget to the tune of at least $12 billion. $12 billion. So he described it as greater than the fiscal crisis of the Great Recession. At the state level, New York's own comptroller office shows a cumulative 3-year structural budget deficit of $34.3 billion, and that gap is growing. Now, before the left tries to blame Trump or COVID or whatever villain is available this week, Mamdani himself blamed his predecessor. The city's independent budget office had been forecasting gaps of like $4 to $8 billion, I was reading, throughout all of 2025. So this has been building for years. The math has been visible to anyone who cared to look. So here's the math that matters. The IRS, not Fox News, not the Heritage Foundation, the IRS tracks taxpayer migration every year based on changes of address on tax returns. So this is the most comprehensive data set that we have on where people and their money are actually going. So here's what the IRS data tells us about New York over the last decade. So New York lost $111 billion in net adjusted gross income to interstate migration in the last decade. So New York lost $11 billion over the last 10 years. $111 billion. Right? According to the research firm WirePoints, this is what we pulled yesterday, from 2000 to 2020, so over 20 years, New York lost the ability to tax a cumulative $1.1 trillion in adjusted gross income due to net out migration. $1 trillion gone. That's not a typo. And it's not spread evenly across income levels either. So that's the key to why this hits so hard. Because in New York City, the top 1% of tax filers, which is about 41,000 people, pay more than 40% of all income taxes. Listen to that again. 41,000 people in New York City pay more than 40% of all the income taxes. So the top 10% pay about 2/3 of all income taxes. What happens when those 41,000 people decide to leave? You're in big trouble. Molly, you in danger, girl. The bottom 50% of New York taxpayers pay a grand total of 0.2% of state income tax. So when you hear people like Kathy Hochul or others say that the rich need to pay their fair share, understand this, that in New York, 41,000 people are already carrying the entire city on their backs. And when those 41,000 people start looking up Zillow listings in Palm Beach County, the math stops working. So the New York State Tax Department, again, this is their own data, reports that in 2024 alone, approximately 1,700 millionaires, remember we're talking about 44,000 people, okay, But in 1 year, they lost 1,700 millionaires that changed their New York address to another state. Millionaires are leaving at a higher rate than regular taxpayers. And in just the past few years, this is from the Citizens Budget Commission, more than 125,000 New Yorkers have fled to Florida alone, taking nearly $14 billion in income with them. So Florida, that's a state that has no state income tax, right? So when Kathy Hochul says, go down to Palm Beach and bring them back, she's literally describing where the money went. She knows exactly where it is. She just does not seem to understand why it left. Now, let's talk about the people, the names and the faces, right? The data on this is pretty powerful, but the names are devastating. So New York is one story, but California, they're running the exact same experiment at the exact same time. And it's producing some of the most remarkable individual cases in American economic history. Remember, listen closely, kids, because you're going to hear this on the lamestream media a week from now, okay? California has a proposed ballot initiative called the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, a one-time 5% tax on the total net worth of any Californian with more than $1 billion in assets, the billionaire tax, right? So here's the clever part. It would apply to anyone who was a California resident as of January 1st, 2026. And that date was not an accident. It was designed to prevent billionaires from leaving in time to avoid it. The people who wrote this bill knew their targets would run, so they tried to build a cage first. But what happened next, I mean, it's beautiful. It's almost poetic. Before the January 1st deadline, Google co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin left California for Miami. Venture capitalist Peter Thiel, gone to Miami. Car loan magnate Don Henke, gone to Las Vegas. Former Uber CEO Travis Kalanick, gone to Texas in December. Director Steven Spielberg became a New York City resident on January 1st. 6 billionaires left. And according to Fortune magazine, those 6 departures took $27 billion in potential tax revenue with them. 6 people, $27 billion. All right, tech entrepreneur Kamath Palihapitiya, a Silicon Valley insider. She's not a Republican operative. Excuse me. He posted on January 1st. Got to get your pronouns right, AP. He posted on January 1st that several of his billionaire acquaintances, worth about an estimated $500 billion, had, in his words, scrambled and left California for good. He then wrote, without these people, the California budget deficit will only get bigger. And California had already been bleeding for years before any of this. We already covered Elon Musk, but there was also Oracle's Larry Ellison. He left for Texas. Then he left again for Nashville, Tennessee. Charles Schwab, they moved their headquarters to Texas. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, gone, Texas. Chevron announced in 2024 it was moving from San Ramon, California to Houston. Even Pabst Brewing Company, yes, the hipster beer of all hipster beers, left California. So these guys, these aren't anonymous wire transfers. These are named companies, named individuals walking out the front door with their employees, their tax liabilities, and their future earnings. And each time one of these people leaves, the California state legislature responds by proposing more taxes on the ones who remain. Idiots. Back in New York, the leading destination is always the same place, Florida. Of New York's total net outflow, Florida absorbed nearly 28% of it. One destination, 28%. And by the way, Jeff Bezos moved from Washington State to Florida in 2024. Washington had just passed a new 7% capital gains tax and was considering a wealth tax. As soon as they started talking about it, Bezos was out. He didn't write an editorial in the Washington Post. He didn't call his favorite senator he owns. He just left, right? These people, they're not waiting for the next election. They're not filing complaints. They're voting with their feet. And think about this. If the billionaires, we're always told that these billionaires control our politics. So these billionaires control our government. But if these billionaires controlled governments so much, why do they have to run away? Why wouldn't they just be able to stop a law that was being passed? I think it really goes to show that there is a big difference in the perception and the reality of who actually runs things. If the billionaires were actually in charge of everything, they wouldn't have to turn tail and run when these things are being proposed. If the billionaires were in control, they would just stop the law from being passed. It goes to show that it's really the unions and the Democrat Party base that are in charge. So these billionaires are voting with their feet, and the governors of these states are standing at podiums asking somebody to go down to Palm Beach and bring them home. Poor Kathy Hochul. Oh. Now let's flip the coin, guys. Let's talk about the free states, right? Missouri, where it's 46 degrees, in Jefferson City. A beautiful day coming. It's going to be a beautiful weekend, too. So this is not just a story about what the blue states are losing. This is a story about what free states like Missouri and others are gaining. And I say free states, not red states, deliberately, because the states that are winning this competition are not winning because of culture wars. They're winning because they have lower taxes, less regulation, more economic freedom, and governments that do not treat their most productive citizens as personal revenue sources, as their piggy banks. The National Taxpayers Union Foundation tracked the IRS data on this exactly. In the same decade that New York lost $111 billion in net adjusted gross income, Florida gained $196 billion. Texas gained $54 billion. So let me put those numbers next to each other one more time. New York lost $111 billion. Florida gained $196 billion. Texas gained $54 billion. And despite having low tax rates, remember, Florida has no income tax rate at all. And here in Missouri, we're about to get that done too, aren't we, Camellia? Aren't we? The influx of taxpayers, so Florida has no income tax. The influx of taxpayers from other states is projected to generate an additional $4.2 billion in revenue for Florida in a single year. Because even though the rate is low, the base keeps growing. So that is the lesson New York and California refuse to learn. You don't need the highest rates to have the highest revenue. You need the most taxpayers. And the most taxpayers go where they are treated the best. So let's look at the population numbers from the Census Bureau. So from April 2020 to July of 2025, Florida grew by 8.9%. Texas grew by 8.8%. In that same period, New York lost 201,000 residents. That's the largest population drop in the country. California lost 200,000 people. U-Haul, which is a moving company, not a think tank, just ranked Texas the #1 growth state for the 7th time in 10 years. U-Haul trucks are going one way, from blue states to free states. Now, here's where it gets surgical. So the Tax Foundation looked at IRS data for high earners specifically. So if you were a taxpayer who made $200,000 or more a year, the most attractive destinations by net inflow: Florida, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Arizona. The states with the largest net losses of high earners: California, New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. Every single state on the losing list has a progressive income tax with high top marginal rates. Every single state on the winning list either has no income tax, a flat tax, or is moving to one. Guys, it's not complicated. It's cause and effect. And Kathy Hochul of New York is at a podium in Albany asking someone to go to Palm Beach and fix it. Now, I want to pause here, guys, and I want to do something important, because it would be easy to hear all this and say, good, those rich people have plenty of money, let them leave. And I want to explain, why this thinking is wrong in some ways, right? It's not just a story about millionaires and billionaires, because what happens to everybody else when they leave? The top 1% of New York City filers we were talking about earlier, those 41,000 people who pay more than 40% of all the city's income tax revenue, what funds New York City's public schools? Those 41,000 people. The subway, 41,000 people. The public hospitals, the parks, the libraries, the social programs that Kathy Hochul even is calling generous. Those 41,000 people and the couple 100,000 behind them, when those people leave, the programs are still there. The spending commitments remain. The contracts remain. The union agreements remain. The pension obligations remain. And the politicians, of course, who have been trained by decades of practice to never cut anything, start looking for new ways to fill the gap. So what is Mayor Zoran Mamdani's answer to the New York City's $12 billion deficit? Raise taxes on the wealthy. The same wealthy who are already leaving. So his proposal would take the city's top income tax rate to 16.7%, the highest top rate in the nation by far. The Citizens Budget Commission, which is not a conservative organization, pushed back directly, saying that tax increases would risk the city's competitiveness at a time of domestic outmigration, declining immigration, and stagnant job numbers. So this is the spiral. Wealthy people leave, the revenues fall, politicians raise taxes on everybody else to cover the gap. More wealthy people leave, revenues fall further, politicians propose even higher taxes, and on it goes until the only people left are the ones who cannot afford to escape. It's like Escape from New York, right? This is not a theory, guys. This is the history of every city and state that has run this experiment. Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, San Francisco. The names change, guys. The spiral is the same. And here's the part that never really gets covered. When a billionaire leaves New York for Florida, they don't just take their income tax check with them. They take their art museum donations. They take their hospital wings. They take their university endowments. They take the charity gala they hosted every year that raised money for kids who needed it. Wealthy New Yorkers are not just taxpayers. They are in the entire civic infrastructure of a world-class city. And when they leave, they take that infrastructure with them. You think that Miami just accidentally became a cultural destination? You think Art Basel, Miami Beach just happened? That is the donor class of New York physically relocating their checkbooks to South Florida and rebuilding what they loved somewhere that wants them. Hochul is smarter than her left flank. She's been blocking Mamdani's tax hikes. She knows the math. She said it herself. The tax base has become eroded, but she's trapped. She cannot admit that the policies of her Democratic Party caused this problem. She cannot look at a budget that grew from $175 billion in 2019 to $262 billion today, a 50% increase in 7 years, and she can't say, we spent too much. Her party will not let her do that. Her base will not let her do that. So instead, she goes to Palm Beach. So the lesson here that everybody already knew. Here's what's maddening about all this, right? This is not new information. People have been pointing this out for decades, okay? Economists have flagged it for decades. The IRS data has been telling this story every single year. The moving trucks, the U-Hauls, have been telling this story every single year. The politicians who presided over these disasters found a way to explain why it was not their fault. Guess whose fault it was? It was Trump's fault. Of course it was. It was COVID. It was Wall Street. It was anything other than the fact that these states decided to treat their most productive citizens as livestock to be shorn. And the livestock walked out of the pen. An economist named Peter Earle put it plainly last year. He wrote, New York can continue to chase headlines with the promises of soaking the rich, or it can recognize that prosperity depends on partnership, not punishment. So that's the entire philosophy of free enterprise. Government and the productive class are supposed to have a relationship. Government provides the courts, contracts, defense, infrastructure, and the productive class generates the wealth that funds all of it. When government breaks that partnership and decides that its job is extraction and redistribution, the productive class eventually figures out what's happening. These aren't stupid people, and they leave. Now, there are serious economists who argue millionaires don't leave in significant numbers when taxes are raised. They will point to studies in New Jersey and Massachusetts, and there is some real data behind that argument. There is a counterpoint to this. But here's the problem. Kathy Hochul does not believe it. The governor of New York, who would benefit the most from the they don't really leave narrative, is herself standing at a microphone admitting that they left. So you cannot simultaneously argue that millionaires do not flee high taxes and explain why your governor is asking for a posse to go retrieve them from Palm Beach.
And being conscious of the facts that I need people who are high net worth to support the generous social programs that we want to have in our state. Right? Now, there are some patriotic millionaires who've stepped up. Okay, cut me the checks. I mean, just if you want to be supportive, but maybe the first step should be go down to Palm Beach and see who you can bring back home, because our tax base has been eroded. So I philosophically don't have a problem. It is like I have to look at the fact that we are in competition with other states who have less of a tax burden on their corporations and their individuals. And I would say remote work changed everything. There were people who could only work in an office in Manhattan or work in New York State, and they were captives to our state. They were going to stay. We saw that that's not the case. I mean, Wall Street, businesses looking at Texas, they're not going there because they have a nicer governor. I know that for sure. But they're going there because of the tax rate. We have to be smart about this. But we can fund what we want to fund with what we already are taking in.
So, guys, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Austin, why should I care about this? I'm not a millionaire. I'm not moving to Florida. How does that affect me? Well, that is the right question. So let me answer that. So this affects you because of who runs this country next. Wealth creates political power. It always has, and it always will. So when wealth moves from New York and California to Florida and Texas and Tennessee or North Carolina, it doesn't just take income tax revenue with it. It also takes political donors. It takes business networks. It takes the people who fund candidates, build institutions, start foundations. Every billionaire who moves from California to Florida is now funding Florida's institutions instead of California institutions. Every hedge fund manager who moves from New York to Miami is now at Miami fundraisers instead of Manhattan fundraisers. Every tech founder who moves from San Francisco to Austin is now part of Texas civic life instead of California civic life. So this is a civilizational transfer. And the people on the receiving end of this understand exactly what is happening. They're building ecosystems. They're building schools, financial districts, sports franchises, cultural centers designed to make sure those people stay. Miami is actually now a serious financial center, if you can believe it. And that doesn't happen without the migration wave from New York. Austin is now a serious tech hub. I mean, that doesn't happen without the migration wave from California. Nashville is now a serious corporate headquarters city, and that does not happen without companies choosing freedom over bureaucracy. These cities were built by people who chose them over the alternatives, and they chose them because, no shit, of freedom. Lower taxes, less government. And more control over their own lives and their own money. And the governors of the states that they left are just now figuring out this is the competition. Kathy Hochul's comment about Palm Beach is embarrassing and hilarious, but underneath that is something important. She's at least admitting that the competition is real. That's more than Gavin Newsom is doing. Gavin Newsom is still out there telling Californians their state is a paradise, everything's great, nothing to see here. Hochul at least looked at the numbers and said, we've got a problem. She just cannot bring herself to say what caused it, and she certainly cannot do what it would take to fix it. You want to bring the millionaires back to New York, Governor? I have a suggestion that does not require a road trip to Florida. Cut the top tax rate. Cut the spending. Get government out of the way. Treat the people who create jobs in New York and fund your programs like partners instead of piggy banks. Show them that New York is the kind of place where enterprise is celebrated, not punished, right? Where building something is rewarded, not taxed into oblivion, where the deal is fair and the government holds up its end. Do that, and you will not need to send anybody to Palm Beach. Do not do that. No recruiting trip in the world is going to save your balance sheet. It's not complicated. This experiment has been running for decades. The results are in, and freedom wins every single time. All right? All right. Have I said my piece? I've said my piece. Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show, and we are the For Liberty Network. We have 5 live shows on this network. One of them that you're watching, Wake Up America show. 2, on Friday nights, we do Freedom Arcade. Just a quick announcement, guys. There's not going to be any shows tomorrow. I'll be out of office all day tomorrow, so no Friday show and no Freedom Arcade. Don't be mad. I know. Every once in a while, though, Daddy's got to take a day off. So I will be out tomorrow. There will be no Wake Up America show Friday morning, and there will be no Freedom Arcade tomorrow night. So just FYI, if anybody is like, hey, where's Austin? Where's the show? Just let him know that I needed a day off tomorrow and tomorrow night. So I will be out of office, but we'll be back on Monday. The For Liberty Network is a passion project of myself and my wife, Stephanie, who puts up with me putting my family at great risk to try to advance the principles of liberty in the most competitive industry in the world. Thank you, Stephanie. So the For Liberty Network is 5 live shows. It's me, Wake Up America show, and then we have the Freedom Arcade on Friday nights typically. But then we also have Culturama starring Daniela Pensac. We have Liberty Tonight starring Brian Piotr. We also have Cafecito Libre starring Maylene Salabaria. And boy, once she figures out how to get all her audio connections right, she's going to have a fantastic show. It's a big venture. It's a risky venture. But if you like it, if you enjoy the content, we'd love to have you be a supporter. If you've been kind of lurking in the background, if you're out of the 104 people who are watching us live, by the way, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I know you have a lot of choices and you chose to be here, and I'm grateful for it. If you'd like to be a part of our network, building the For Liberty Network so that we can spread the ideas of liberty now and into the future, then sign up to be a Peterson's Patriot. We have something like 120 or 140 people who are supporting the For Liberty Network right now that are Peterson's Patriots. So if you are interested in supporting our mission, you can go to wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. If you guys would like to see our bonus content today, we have unlockables on the show. It's kind of a fun little way to help monetize. So if you make any Rumble Rant contributions, like I saw Joni Rankin did earlier, then all of the contributions, when they pool together, if they add up to $100, that unlocks our bonus content on the Wake Up America show. What's the bonus content? Well, we produce a little 5-minute mini documentary for the Wake Up America show. That's a fun little unlockable for you. And for the 250th anniversary of the United States, we have been doing a series on the great battles of the American Revolution. And then we've been doing some biopics of some of the great heroes of the American Revolution. Yesterday, we did the Marquis de Lafayette. And today, you can find out who it is by unlocking it. So drop those Rumble Rants or gift some subs to people in the chat, or go to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4, libertyshop.com. Make a purchase during the live show. That goes to unlock it as well.
You don't regret that people might have lost important income to support their lives?
No. I think it was more important to reduce the federal deficit from $2 trillion to close to 0.
Right. Did you reduce the federal deficit?
No, we didn't.
This is a history of the HIV/AIDS prison movement and its legacies in the United States. My book project narrates how activists fought the convergence of HIV/AIDS and incarceration from inside and outside prisons across the Reagan through Clinton years, and argues that this organizing holds legacies in the prison abolition movement of the 1990s to today. This is one of the grants that you or Mr. Fox identified as craziest at NEH, is that right?
That's right.
Why did you identify this as one of the craziest grants?
Because it references feminist and queer insights into prison abolition and LGBTQ studies.
Any other reasons?
No.
Examining military service from the margins, the complicated service discussion series will bring together veterans and community members to examine the experiences of service members who identify themselves as female, Black, Native American, LGBTQ, or an immigrant, the dynamics, reasoning, and strength behind serving a country that does not always serve you in return. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
You and Mr. Fox identified this as one of the craziest grants at NEH.
Yes, it appears so.
Why did you do that?
Because it explicitly says LGBTQ.
Do you have any history in, like, let's say, scholarly peer review?
No.
Okay. So this judgment call was made by you and your personal judgment combined with Justin's personal judgment to cancel grants based on DEI.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's inappropriate in any way that someone in their 20s with no experience with grants or federal government was making personal judgment calls about what grants to cancel?
Objection. No, I don't think it's inappropriate.
Why not?
Objection. I think a person can have enough judgment from reading books and being well informed outside of traditional experience to make judgment calls about obvious things like a grant that literally lists DEI in its description to know whether it violates an executive order.
I'm sorry. I'm saying books because you said books. What books would you have read that would have informed your opinion on what grants to cancel based on DEI or not?
There were no books.
Get him, kid. All right. It's February 2025. Elon Musk is standing on stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland. The crowd is electric. We all remember this. The mandate feels historic. And Elon Musk is holding a chainsaw. Not a metaphorical chainsaw, an actual physical chainsaw. Remember, he waves it over his head. The crowd goes insane. In that moment, the world's richest man wielding a power tool over a screaming conservative audience, the entire promise of the Department of Government Efficiency is crystallized into one perfect, unforgettable symbol. We are going to cut the government. We're going to cut it deep. We're going to cut it fast, and we're going to start now. Now, he had said that we would cut at least $2 trillion in annual savings at a Trump rally in Madison Square Garden in October of 2024. $2 trillion cut from a government that had grown fat and slow and corrupt and arrogant over decades of unchecked expansion. The libertarian in me, and frankly the American in me, wanted to believe that badly. Now, fast forward to a conference room somewhere in Manhattan, January 23rd, 2026, a different scene entirely. A 28-year-old named Nate Kavanaugh sitting across from a lawyer. That video that you just watched. He's a tech entrepreneur, formerly co-founder of a startup called Brainbase. He dropped out of an Indiana university at 19. He's a Forbes 30 under 30 in 2021. 0 days of prior government experience. He's being deposed there as part of a federal lawsuit over his actions as a DOGE staffer. He had been paid $120,000 a year by the General Services Administration, the equivalent pay of a federal employee with 13 years of service to help run the government's efficiency operation. So, of course, they hate him. The lawyer asked him in that video a simple question. You don't think that people might have lost important income to support their lives? Kavanaugh answers, no, I think it was more important to reduce the federal deficit from $2 trillion to close to zero. Hell yes. So Nate Kavanaugh says, no, we didn't. Elon Musk held up a chainsaw. Nat Kavanaugh said he didn't reduce the deficit. And that is the story of DOGE. So today we're going to do something that a lot of conservative media is probably not going to do. We're going to tell you the truth about what DOGE actually did, why it fell short of its primary goal, what was lost in the process, who saw it coming, and what Javier Milei in Argentina did differently that is actually working. Stay with me this morning because you guys are going to love this segment, okay? So let's start with the facts because the facts are impressive and damning at the same time. And I think you deserve to hear both sides on this. On the workforce side, DOGE delivered something genuinely historic. The federal government shed approximately 271,000 jobs under DOGE. That's a 9% reduction in the federal workforce. Bravo. The Cato Institute confirmed that this was the largest peacetime workforce reduction since the demobilization after World War II and the Korean War. So in terms of sheer headcount, DOGE moved the needle in a way that no peacetime administration ever has. That's real. That's not nothing. That deserves acknowledgement. That deserves a full-throated applause. But now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Okay, the Cato Institute's formal analysis of DOGE's fiscal impact found that DOGE did not reduce spending. DOGE had no noticeable effect on the trajectory of spending. So the federal government spent $7.6 trillion in the first 11 months of 2025. That's $248 billion more than in the same period in 2024. Good morning, Ken Shiroyu. So let this number settle, guys. DOGE fired 271,000 people, and the government spent $250 billion more than the year before. The Brookings Institution's Hamilton Project confirmed the same thing. So this isn't just like a Cato Institute deal, right? There's a lot more to this. Spending went from 7.1 trillion to about 7.5 trillion, a nearly 6% increase. So the national debt since Trump took office on January 20th, 2025, it grew by over 2 trillion. Now let's talk about what DOGE claimed to have saved and what independent analysts actually believe. Musk's original promise was 2 trillion in cuts. At a rally in October 2024, he said, and I quote, "I think we can do at least 2 trillion." He later called that the best case scenario, and then he set 1 trillion as his realistic target, then revised again to $150 billion. DOGE's own official website claimed $215 billion in estimated savings, far short of a trillion or 2 trillion. But Reuters and independent budget analysts, they reported that those numbers were very hard to verify, so we don't even know if there was actually $215 billion in savings. They showed some line items were inflating contract values or canceling items that were never funded. And the Brookings Institution, they did an analysis to put the real verified savings figure dramatically lower. So here's the gap, right? Between what DOGE claimed on its website and what outside analysts can actually confirm, that's a huge gap, large enough to drive a truck. DOGE fired 271,000 people and claimed $215 billion in savings. But some independent analysis say the verified number is actually a fraction of that. And the government spent $248 billion more than the year before. So why did this happen? Right, the Cato Institute explained it. Federal salaries account for around 8% of total spending. DOGE went to war with 8% of the budget and left the other 92% completely untouched. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, military, interest on the debt, the entitlement programs that sort of represent the structural core of federal spending, none of that was touched. None of it could be touched without an act of Congress. And on top of that, the government hired contractors to replace many of the employees that were fired. So in some cases, the same work was being done at higher cost by outside vendors. The Cato Institute calculated even a 10% cut in the entire federal workforce would only save about $40 billion annually. So DOGE cut nearly 9% of the workforce, and Cato's math on this holds. The savings are not there because the savings cannot be there through that method. So this isn't a failure of courage. In my mind, I think that this is sort of a failure of theory. Now let's talk about Nate Kavanaugh. That was the young man that we just heard from, because his deposition has kind of become the human face of something that Washington has needed for 60 years. And this is what Kavanaugh and his colleague Justin Fox, who worked on this, actually accomplished. So they were sent to the National Endowment for the Humanities. That's an independent federal agency. They were founded in 1965. They spent over $6 billion in taxpayer money over their history on grants to like museums. We're talking about libraries, archives, documentary films, and things. A lot of it is not legitimate spending, of course. On March the 12th, 2025, Kavanaugh and Fox arrived. Within 22 days, they had terminated 97% of the NEH active grant portfolio. So $100 million in congressionally appropriated funds were gone, and they did it without an army of consultants, without a 2-year government review process, without a 400-page report that nobody will read. 2 guys, 22 days. And how did they do it so fast? Well, you guessed it. They used AI, specifically ChatGPT. Nice job, guys. Yeah, and of course, the legacy media wants you to treat that like it's a scandal. But I think we should treat that as an innovation. The prompt, as confirmed in court documents, asked whether each grant related to DEI. So they flagged it for review in under 120 characters. They ran over 1,000 grant descriptions through it and got answers in seconds. So what would have taken a government bureaucracy 18 months and 40 committee meetings took 2 men and a laptop. And let's talk about what they actually cut, because the media is crying over this stuff, and I think you deserve the truth. DEI grants, gone. LGBTQ studies grants, gone. Grants, grants that built on the premise that American history is fundamentally a story of oppression that needs to be subsidized by the American taxpayers, gone. $350,000 HVAC system upgrade for the High Point Museum in North Carolina, gone. And you know what? Good. Why is a county museum's air conditioning system a federal responsibility? It isn't. It never was. North Carolina has a government. High Point has a city council. If that museum needs a new HVAC unit, that is a local problem for local taxpayers to solve, not something a family in Iowa should be paying for. Am I right? Am I right? Of course I'm right. I can click that applause button. That's what makes me right. So yeah, some grants did get swept up that weren't squarely DEI. The AI flagged an anthology about Jewish writers reflecting on the Holocaust, right? The left made that the emotional center of their entire media campaign. But let me offer you a different frame. The federal government's not a Jewish cultural foundation. It's not a museum foundation. It's not a literary foundation. It is a government. When you believe that the federal government should not be in the grant-making business at all, then no individual canceled grant, however the sympathetic the subject matter might be, changes that principle. Now, Holocaust, it deserves to be remembered, but it doesn't follow that remembering it is Washington's job. Now, the lawyers got Kavanaugh in this deposition chair and asked him if he had reduced the federal deficit, and he said no. Now, the media acted like they had found the smoking gun, but here's what they left out. Kavanaugh's exact words here, right? No, I think it was more important to reduce the federal government from $2 trillion to close to zero, meaning he knew the mission, he understood the mission, he knew the scale of what needed to be done, and he knew that $100 million in one small agency was not going to be enough by itself. So was it a confession of failure? Sure. But that is a diagnosis of why we needed more DOGE, not less. Right? The deficit didn't close because Washington didn't let it close. Congress kept spending. Agencies lawyered up. Judges intervened. The bureaucracy did what bureaucracies do. It resisted, it delayed, and survived. Now, Kavanaugh's failure, right, is, if you want to call it that, is not that he went too far. It's that he was one man against a system that's built over 60 years to be impossible to cut. Kavanaugh told the lawyer he felt pressure from the White House to move fast. So we were getting pressure from basically the White House to effectuate these contracts and grant terminations that are aligned with the executive order. So that is a soldier following orders from his chain of command to execute a mandate the American people voted for. The left calls that a time pressure tactic. I call that accountability to the electorate. And when the lawyer asked Kavanaugh if he regretted the cancellations, like a Chad, he said no. And he explained why. Because he believes in something other than his own career survival. Now, the deposition video that I'm playing here, right, it went viral because, of course, the left thought that this was going to be a nail in the coffin for people like us. But most of the people who were sharing this were people who were celebrating this young man. Here he is, a young man walking into a room full of lawyers, sharpening their knives. He represents himself with zero apology, and he says plainly he would do it again, that the mission mattered more than the optics. Now, that is rarer than you think. I have lived just outside of Washington, D.C., and known a lot of people who worked in and around government, but it is extremely rare to see this kind of courage in D.C. Nat Kavanaugh walked into a 60-year-old bureaucracy in his late 20s with no government experience, no playbook, and he shut off nearly $100 million in government spending in 3 weeks using a simple ChatGPT prompt. The permanent class spent decades building a grant system designed to fund their ideological allies on the American taxpayers' dime. Kavanaugh and Fox burned a significant chunk of it down in 22 days. My only complaint, they didn't get to finish the job. Now, I have a whole theory, guys. I have a theory about why this happened. And I think it has something to do with the split between Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. But sadly, I'm not going to get a chance to explain that to you now. Maybe Camille and I will talk about it. We're going to talk to her about the University of Arkansas Turning Point USA chapter has disaffiliated itself, saying that, well, it's not the same since Charlie Kirk is gone. We'll talk about that. And Joe Kent saying Charlie Kirk said stop the war with Iran before he died. All that and more on the Wake Up America show and the 4 Liberty Network. In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal. Imagine bringing George Washington back to life. Just to explain that in 2025, men can get pregnant, waving an American flag might offend someone, and our government is $34 trillion in debt. But that's not all, George. We have drag queen story hour for toddlers. Pronouns are mandatory. And Harvard can't define woman. Oh. And we send billions to Ukraine but can't fix potholes in Ohio. You know, just normal modern empire stuff. I'm sure he'd be totally cool with it. Right after he finishes reloading. He didn't cross the Delaware for this nonsense, but you can carry on the fight with gear that would have made King George cry. Shop bold, shop free, shop forlibertyshop.com. Legend has it, back in 1773, a band of angry, overtaxed patriots stormed a British ship, found the king's favorite tea, and said, "This would taste better without the tyranny." Then they tossed it overboard. Fast forward to today. That revolutionary spirit lives on in Boston Harbor Black, the boldest brew in the For Libert tea lineup. It's dark, it's smooth, it's unapologetically American, just like the folks who drink it. Whether you're sweetening it up on the front porch or drinking it straight like a Minuteman before battle, this isn't tea for royalty, it's tea for rebels. No fake flavors, no corporate slogans, just a cold glass of Don't Tread on Me in liquid form. So skip the woke iced tea aisle and stock up on Boston Harbor Black at forlibertyshop.com. Because when the heat's rising, the least you can do is drink like a patriot. When the Founding Fathers dreamed of liberty, they forgot one thing: coffee. Introducing Founding Flavors Coffee, the brew that built America, and the brew that's fueling a new revolution, one kitchen at a time. Small batch roasted, Patriot approved, and disappearing faster than a redcoat at Yorktown. Don't get left behind, soldier. Real patriots are starting their mornings with Founding Flavors. And trust us, freedom tastes better with a fresh cup in your hand. Stop drinking those tyrant brews who take your money and don't support your values. Stocks are limited, demand is booming, and your morning deserves a taste of liberty. Order now at forlibertyshop.com before the next shipment gets signed, sealed, and sold out. Founding Flavors Coffee, the official brew of morning rebellions everywhere. Get yours at forlibertyshop.com. Look, not all t-shirts are created equal. Some just sit there. Others start conversations. The ones at forlibertyshop.com, they raise eyebrows, win arguments, and occasionally get you banned from PTA meetings. Whether you're repping freedom, mocking tyrants, or just making the left squirm, we've got the gear that says what you're thinking. Loud, proud, unapologetic. Grab yours today at forlibertyshop.com because your shirt should speak louder than your neighbor's bumper sticker. When the Founding Fathers dreamed of liberty, here
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back, with sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger.
Turning Point USA chapter at the University of Arkansas announcing it is rebranding and disaffiliating with the national group. The chapter's president said in a statement posted on social media, the executive board had become concerned with the direction of the national group. Says the chapter will now be rebranding to Young American Revival, focusing on advocating for Christian conservative values. Comes a week after Turning Point's CEO, Erica Kirk, paid a visit to Arkansas. Governor Sanders signed a proclamation endorsing TPUSA chapters.
Welcome back. My next guest needs no introduction because if you watch this show regularly, you already know her, Camelia Peterson. She puts up with me, which takes a special kind of patience. Good morning. Hi, CJ.
Good morning. Good morning.
Glad to have you here. So, on March 16th, the University of Arkansas chapter, Turning Point, announced that they're done with Turning Point USA. They were branding as a Young American Revival. The president says that the organization has gotten, quote, consumed with metrics, creating viral cultural moments, and generally chasing relevance. And that happened 5 days after Erica Kirk, the new CEO of TPUSA, toured Arkansas with the governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, to announce Turning Point's expansion into every Arkansas high school. So, Camelia, this is about grief, power, conspiracy theories, and whether a movement built around one man can survive losing him. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, speaking of the expansion into every Arkansas high school, heard something about that the other just briefly in passing. And I could not tell if it was something that they made optional or that was mandatory. I didn't quite understand what was going on with putting it in high schools, because I do believe that, students should be able to have a chapter. Like, they can't, exclude them, right? From having a chapter in a high school, but you also can't mandate it either. So I don't know, that's weirdness going on, but it was really ironic that they took that stance right after Erica Kirk had visited. And I can completely understand where they're coming from. I respect the position. I mean, and this was not some, I think it's important to point out that the people in this chapter who wrote this and the primary young man who authored this letter is not somebody who's just new to the scene or anything like that. They've been with TPUSA on the college chapter for years. So they've got experience in this. They've experienced what it was before, and now they see what it's become now. And I think they're spot on, and have a lot of respect that they came out publicly with it, because it's hard to say where things are going with TPUSA. Will they get backlash? I actually don't know anymore. I've just kind of been waiting. There was this whole, resurgence of interest in TPUSA and all of this, attention that it generated. But I think we always knew that was going to eventually die down and the sheen was going to wear off, right?
The chapter president, Dino Fantagrossi, he said in his statement that Turning Point has been using Charlie Kirk's names in ways that feel, and this is his direct quote, disingenuous and manipulative. He said phrases like Charlie would have said and Charlie would have wanted make him sick. As somebody who watches these organizations, is that a fair criticism in your mind of what Turning Point has been doing?
Sure, I think so. I mean, everybody has their version of what Charlie said, right? I mean, everybody has their text and their last words from him, and a lot of them are very, very different. And so, you would think that would be able to clear a lot of these things up. But I'm not, it's been hard to see that coming from her either, because, you've got this whole Candace Owens debacle and all the things that she's saying. And I don't like, and does Erica Kirk really push back against it? I mean, she met with her. Like, why would you do that? If this is crazy stuff that she's saying, why not refute it? And I think that they did initially try to refute some of that, but it feels like it's just been a chaotic mess and there's no cohesive message and they've kind of lost the plot. All of their meetings, by the way, that they do, they're still like, it feels like it's supposed to be a who's who of who wants to get on a public stage and get some, spotlight time, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter if they're grounded in principle or not.
I mean, I've met Charlie Kirk several times, but I never met Erica. She was elected CEO 8 days after her husband was killed. The board voted unanimously. Some people say that's a beautiful act of loyalty to a grieving widow who wants to carry on her husband's work. Other people say people around her moved too fast while everybody was still in shock. So do you think maybe from a pure governance standpoint, is that how you build a durable organization or is it a problem? What do you think?
Well, I think probably this is the downside, and it's the pitfall when you have an organization that grows as quickly as this one did, and it is around a central figure. Because when Charlie Kirk was really the thing that was holding TPUSA together, when he's gone, I mean, like what's their foundation? What do they have left? Because if you don't, while he's there, if you don't build up that infrastructure and have that cohesiveness around this, and I don't know, we don't know. Maybe he had these conversations with Erica, and maybe this was kind of the plan of a what if something ever happened. There's no way to know, and it's hard to say. But I do think that there's just I think it's difficult for somebody who's just lost their spouse in such a horrific way to step into that position. Can it be done? I think surely, like, humans are resilient and capable of great things. But I don't know. I just don't think that it was, I think that he was the central figure and the thing that held everything together. And I think they're just kind of rudderless.
Now let's talk about Candace Owens. She spent the last 6 months alleging that Charlie's assassination involved the Mossad, the French government, Egyptian planes, tracking Erica Kirk, and members of Turning Point's own leadership. So is Candace Owens grieving, grifting?
I mean, I think Candace Owens is a woman scorned.
Yeah. You believe the she loved Charlie Kirk conspiracy theory?
I mean, it seems pretty plausible. and like the maths, I don't know.
A woman scorned. Yeah. So there's a lot of crazy stuff being said. Now, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in the issue with the TPUSA chapter, and you mentioned this, that this gentleman had said, I think it's really important when it comes to application to other organizations too, and kind of conservatism as a whole. Because when he said that, we're no longer focused on our guiding North Star, and instead we become consumed with metrics and, creating viral cultural moments, chasing relevance. He said we've become reactionary when we need to be proactive. And there are very few things that sum up the current conservative movement and the right than that last sentence, because everything is reactionary. If the left does it, we react against it. And we're not being proactive in thinking 50 years down the road in what is good policy for that. Like, everything is the right now, and how does it affect me? And what can I get done, in the next year? And who cares what the repercussions are, 10 years down the road.
Now, Joe Kent, who just stepped down working with national security for the Trump administration, has made a pretty bold claim about something that he said Charlie Kirk said to him before he passed away. Take a listen.
And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway. And I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space. And he said, Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran. Charlie Kirk.
Interesting. So a lot of people saying that Charlie Kirk said things to me before he passed. Candace Owens has kind of based her post-Charlie career on Charlie said these things to me privately. What do you think about what Joe Kent had to say?
I mean, I don't think that. I think it's plausible. Like there are a lot of people who would have said that. It's not an unusual thing to say, and I also don't think that you could take that and say that that's what Charlie would say right now, right? There's been time and circumstances that have elapsed in that span of time, and I think that there are many, many, many people that did not want us to get into a war with Iran, and still don't want us to be there getting into a war with Iran. So, I don't think that's an unusual or particularly profound thing that he said that would I don't know that you could translate to mean anything that has anything to do with Joe Kent resigning, right? I know he's trying to make that connection and use that clout, but it's just really not there. I think that's a very ordinary thing to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to my good friend Camelia Peterson right now. We started this segment talking a little bit about the University of Arkansas disaffiliating itself from the national organization of the Turning Point USA organization from Arkansas, disaffiliating from the national organization because they didn't like the fact that they felt like people were putting words in Charlie's mouth. Things like Charlie would have wanted, or Charlie would have said, et cetera, et cetera. And so now they're going their own way. There's just been a sort of a strange kind of cottage industry that's popped up around people who knew Charlie Kirk that are saying that he would have said this, or this is what he said to me when he was alive. And I have to say, it's really painful, and it seems to be tearing the right apart from what I could tell, although a little bit of a bright spot. I'm not sure if you heard the news in terms of where MAGA is on the conflict in Iran versus, the podcasters' opinions versus actual MAGA, Camelia. Take a listen to this.
And this is one of those, because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%. 100%. If you are a member of MAGA in the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical
genius. CNN.
You can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Now, there are some Republicans who disapprove of Donald John Trump, but they are not members of the Make America Great Again movement. The bottom line is this: if you are a member of MAGA, you approve of Donald Trump.
It's interesting, though, because there have been a couple prominent people who have sort of come out online, and they're very mad about this war with Iran because he promised no new wars. Is there any sign that people might be leaving MAGA relative to 2024?
Yeah, okay. So, I've said it before, and, the theme of this segment is Tucker Carlson be darned. And when we look at the numbers, I've heard some people say, but when you look at those MAGA numbers, it doesn't account for those who might have left MAGA. But take a look here. Americans who identify as MAGA, in November of 2024, it was 28% of Americans. Now it's basically the same. If anything, it's slightly higher at 30%. The bottom line is this: the MAGA base within the GOP is not shrinking. It's the same size. If anything, it is slightly larger than it was back in 2024 when, of course, Donald Trump won a second term. So that
okay, we'll pause. There's more to this, Camelia, but does that about track?
I suppose so. It's like anybody who's going to answer a poll, there's only a certain kind of people who are going to identify as MAGA. There's probably a whole psychological discussion in that alone. But yes, of course, the people that identify as MAGA are going to be, 100% on board, because honestly, the people who identify as MAGA, largely, I'm not saying this is every single person, but the vast majority of them are going to also say whatever Trump does is great. We love that. Don't question him. Trust the plan. And there's no fault to be found. So this is it's identity politics. It's really comical that CNN is doing this. By the way, I think this is self-preservation at work.
Well, do you trust the plan, Camelia?
No.
Why? What do you mean? Why not?
I like the Reagan plan of trust but verify.
Okay, so you trust the plan, but verify the plan.
The trust has eroded. I will say that, and I think that's just because every good American should have a healthy distrust of their government, no matter who it is, right?
Amen. I'll give you that.
But there are things that I think that I have to, withhold judgment on, making a judgment call on them until it plays out more because, I don't know everything and I'm skeptical about it. But it's hard to say when I don't have all of the knowledge to base an opinion on, one way or the other.
Well,
I mean,
Camelia,
the Iran war is one of those things.
Since everybody else is rampantly speculating about what Charlie Kirk would have said or thought or done, do you think that Charlie Kirk would have approved of people using the conflict in Iran to say that they're going to vote for the Democrats now?
No. I mean, I think Charlie would be appalled at the way things have gone in general since his death, as far as the way people are, the whole podcaster wars nonsense. I think all of this drama that's going on, I feel like this needs to be, is it the Telenova station? What is that? This is like the soap opera for the right. I mean, it is just, I think that he would be appalled at this because when you watch the videos of him in action at all of these events that he held, this is not what he portrayed as what he wanted people to be doing as far as interacting with each other and, finding common ground, being principled, I think that it probably could be said that Charlie, like any healthy adult, hopefully, probably changed his views over time. I hope we all have, right? But yeah, I think he would be appalled at the current state of things.
Camelia, this, Charlie Kirk was holding together a pretty wide tent. Pro-Israel conservatives, Christian nationalists, traditional Reagan types, young MAGA populists, some libertarians. But he was keeping Nick Fuentes at arm's length. He called him vermin in private texts. Now Fuentes is going out on Tucker Carlson's show, and Carlson is telling Fuentes, you won. So how worried are you about where young conservatism goes without Kirk as a guardrail?
I do have concerns. I personally know young men who have gotten sucked into this and who do like Nick Fuentes and who are listening to him. And, and honestly, it's frustrating because I don't know what it takes to show them that, not if you want to be involved in politics. Number one, your foundation here, your moral and principled foundation here is rotten if you're following Nick Fuentes. And number two, if you think that, it's great to be white nationalists, and Hitler wasn't so bad, right? Your foundation is rotten. And number two, if you want to have influence in politics, I'm sorry, but you are not going to be able to go in right now and say that stuff openly. You will still be rejected at this point. So, and you will not be able to have a spot, in the future. So that's a good thing though, because I know that I, as much as anybody else, want to bring those young men in and help them grow and learn and be part of the process. But I have a hard line with that. If that's going to be, your guiding principles and your behavior, no, I don't. I want no part of that here. Grow up first, learn some things, come back.
Oh, damn, Camelia, it's got that mom energy. Camelia, what else is going on in your world? Anything new that you'd like to share with us or plug before we let you go?
I think probably the biggest thing right now is there's the fight in Missouri over the income tax. I was telling you before we came on live that I was glad you played the New York stuff earlier, and I will take that and use it because there's a big pushback even on, I don't know how big it is on the right. It feels big, but also we're in that bubble and, things sound louder than what they really are. But people are just it's weird to see people on the right saying that, an income tax is somehow better than a consumption tax. And, and the bottom line is they're not looking, and they say, and the Democrats will tell you Florida and Texas are really different. Well, okay, you also have these businesses, all of these people who are producing your corporate income tax, your jobs and everything, they're fleeing to these places. It doesn't matter if they're a direct comparison or not. You can't sit still and be stagnant. And honestly, I'm tired of people thinking, just about how does it affect me? I want to know how this is going to affect my kids, 20 years down the road, which is why we need to do it now. So this is good. I'm going to take it and use it. And let's get rid of income tax in Missouri.
All right. So you heard him. Brad, cut the clip. Camelia needs it to abolish the income tax here in the state of Missouri. The Kathy Hochul stuff. All right. Camelia, we appreciate all that you do for liberty here in Missouri. You have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for your time.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
You want to know why Lindsey Graham is still around? Lindsey Graham is still around because he's spent several decades gathering influence, working within the system, building a base of power, so now he can get judges approved. He can get bills passed in the Senate. No, it's because he's blackmailed. Nobody has ever actually played politics ever. It's all blackmail. You need to stop. I'm going to kill myself. You might not actually like him. You might even hate him. That's fine. Those are things about him that are true. Those are things about his career that are true. The ability to maneuver that he's established for himself in D.C. That is true. Joe Kent could not make it a year in a political appointee position without resigning and having a huge public blow-up that's going to have probably a similar net political effect to Trump's Rob Reiner post on Truth Social. Like, who would you rather have in your corner if your job was to win? If your job was to win by getting judges approved, bills passed in the Senate? And guess what? Kent already lost 2 elections before Trump started calling him retarded. He's basically guaranteed to lose any election now that is not happening on Rumble. The public wants winners. They want to follow Donald Trump. Again, this is all very online. The base has never been more unified than they are now behind Trump. He can bring their ideas to life. You don't want to deal with people like Lindsey Graham? Yeah, get in line. Nobody does. That means you actually have to play better politics. You have to be smarter. You have to think further ahead. You have to keep your head down. You have to present yourself well. Don't burn people. Don't publicly masturbate. You have to actually maintain standards. It's not glamorous. You probably won't get to have some kind of epic hero moment. But that is what is necessary. And for most people, they are less concerned about what is necessary. They are less concerned about actually doing something.
Right.
And they are more concerned about attention. And actually, insofar as they pretend to be concerned about actually doing something, that is just for attention. Right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. That's correct. John Doyle can't soil the Doyle. I was based and Doyle pilled before it was cool. Thanks so much for tuning into the Wake Up America show, guys. We appreciate all of your support. We're well on the way to unlock the bonus content. Still a chance to see today's mini documentary. We're halfway there. Keep those Rumble Rant donations coming during the break. And if we hit $100 raised, I will turn on the bonus content for you guys to watch so you can watch a mini documentary instead of commercials. Coming up next, my next guest, he writes for Reason Magazine. He published 2 pieces this week that I think every American needs to read. One is about why the next economic crisis is going to be worse than anything our country has ever faced. The other is about why you personally need to be able to defend yourself because, as we've seen with some of these terror attacks, the government's not going to be there to do it for you. JD Tuccilli is next. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wake Up America show, and we are on the 4 Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fascist fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
The left in America tells us not to have kids to save the planet, but in Cuba, they stopped having kids because the state destroyed the earth.
Collectivism doesn't create justice. It creates shortages, corruption, and power for the few. I've not just seen it, I've lived it. My family escaped it. Now the same failed ideas are being sold to a new generation. I'm here to expose the lie and defend liberty. From Cuba to Argentina to the United States, the freedom movement is rising. Cafecito Libre is the exile voice of economic truth. Cafecito Libre, premiering March 3rd as part of the For Liberty Network, only on Rumble.
Well, I didn't know about your Italian roots either. I thought he was a super wasp. You know, to me, Mike was always a wasp. Now I learned that this is serious Italian stuff, right? Well, that'll be good for you, I think. His image has changed a hell of a lot.
President Trump. Good morning. Welcome back. My next guest is J.D. Tuccilli, contributing editor at Reason Magazine, author of their weekly newsletter, The Rattler, which everybody better sign up for. I read it every time it comes out. It covers government overreach and threats to everyday liberty. J.D. published two pieces this week that hit pretty close to home for the show, so I had to have him on. The first argues growing federal debt is not just a long-term problem. It's actively destroying the government's ability to respond when the next crisis hit. The second makes the case that last Thursday's double terrorist attacks at a Michigan synagogue and at Old Dominion University in Virginia are a stark reminder that if someone decides to come for you, the only person who can stop them in that moment is you. J.D. Tuccilli, welcome to the show. It's nice to see you again.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, JD, your piece opens with a line from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, and it stopped me cold. The U.S. has never experienced an economic shock as indebted as we are today. So we're at 100% of GDP in debt, essentially at the post-World War II record. So what does that actually mean in practical terms for an ordinary American family when the next recession hits?
Well, the thing is, in order to address economic crises, many of which, let's admit, are caused by the government itself, the government needs certain tools. Very often it involves borrowing or raising taxes or spending more in some way. Whether those are good ideas or not, that's a separate debate entirely. But those paths get foreclosed when the government is already bound by so much debt, debt to a level that we haven't seen since the last major global war. Basically, the government has hobbled itself by taking on 100% of GDP in national debt and taking it on in a time that was not a matter of crisis, taking that on just to address regular policy choices that it has made, so that the next time a crisis comes and it may want to engage in emergency spending, it has a much smaller toolbox than it has had in the past.
Now, JD, the Penn-Wharton budget model puts the real federal debt, when you include unfunded Social Security and Medicare obligations, at closer to $100 trillion. Not 36 trillion, not 38, $100 trillion. But the official number the government uses does not include that. Why?
No, the official number is about $38 trillion right now, although it's going up so fast that it's hard to keep track. That includes the serious number, which is debt held by the public, and that also includes money that government agencies owe to each other. The debt held by the public is the serious figure, $31.2 trillion. But what the Penn-Wharton budget project points out is that the federal government has made huge obligations in terms of Medicare and Social Security, which it has no plans for actually covering those expenses. And those add tens of trillions of dollars to the actual tab. Now, honestly, the U.S. Treasury agrees quietly in its own analyses. If you dig deep enough through the U.S. Treasury website, you'll find that its own analyses say that Medicare and Social Security are, in fact, unfunded to the tunes of a minimum of $60 trillion. And then it goes up from there, depending on the time frame you're looking at and the assumptions that you're making. So they actually essentially agree with the Penn-Wharton budget project. That has not burdened the U.S. yet to the same extent that national debt has, probably because the obligations for Social Security and Medicare, even though they hang over taxpayers, are policy choices that could be repudiated. The government could say tomorrow, abolish Social Security and Medicare. Those obligations would not be there anymore. But as it stands now, that's essentially unfunded obligations. It's in addition to the debt that brings the total burden on the U.S. government up to about $100 trillion. So that is that much less leeway that the U.S. government has to address the next economic crisis that's coming along, which is something to contemplate right now that we're watching oil hitting close to $100 a barrel. Brent, I think Brent is up to about $114 a barrel. The economies in Europe and Asia are taking a huge hit because of energy. Not that they were in great shape in Europe to begin with, even before all of this. So the global economy, of course, is all tied together. The U.S. is affected by this. We're not immune to it. And the U.S. government's hands are tied relative to whatever comes down the road next.
Now, your piece lays out 5 possible ways this debt crisis ends. There's financial panic, inflation, austerity, outright default, or a slow national slide into poverty. And you note that a combination of them is possible. But of those scenarios, which one of those keeps you up at night?
Well, the one I think is most likely is something like Argentina, pre-Milei Argentina, where the government monetizes debt so that the dollar buys less and less and less. So that the government meets on paper its obligations, but it's paying off with toilet paper. And of course, that toilet paper is in our pockets. So we're trying to pay our own bills with the devalued dollar. That means we get poorer and poorer. This also crowds out, at the same time the government continues its borrowing, that crowds out private debt markets. So it becomes harder and harder to launch a business. You've got to pay higher and higher interest rates in order to borrow money if you can find it at all. And you end up with kind of the crumbling remains of the country that you grew up in, wondering just when the place got so run down. That's the one I think that is the most likely, and the one that kind of keeps me up at night because it's the easy scenario for the government to slide into.
Now, you cite data showing that since 2001, federal revenue has grown at 3.9%, faster than inflation, right? But spending has grown at 5.5%. So the government's already collecting more money every year, but they're still falling further behind. Earlier on the show, I was playing this clip of Kathy Hochul in New York saying, if you're a patriotic millionaire, then you need to start writing checks. We need people to go down to Palm Beach and bring some of these people back because of the exodus of New Yorkers to Florida. So, but when people say just tax the rich more, like Zoran Mondani is trying to do as the solution, what is wrong with that? And what does the historical record actually show about what happens when you raise taxes on a shrinking tax base?
Well, you end up with Kathy Hochul in New York begging people who have money to come back to New York and give her more tax money. That's ridiculous. I mean, as those figures show, tax revenues have been rising faster than inflation. That means the government is collecting more and more and more. And what Hochul is admitting is that it's still not enough. Historically, of course, people with means are the most mobile people. They can take their capital and go. And in fact, in that speech, she admitted that you're seeing businesses up and move, that financial jobs are going to Texas, that a lot of this was the revelation over the last few years, that jobs don't have to be tied to an office, in Wall Street. They can be any place. You could have someone working out of their living room in their dream location, and that dream location does not have to be subject to New York's tax rate. Well, the same idea, the same issue applies on a national basis. If you try to chase down the wealthy, they leave. The U.S. has traditionally been a beneficiary of that. We still see money flowing in from China. I've got friends who are Venezuelan whose parents got out by the skin of their teeth because they hid money in the U.S. and owned a condo here that ended up being their safe haven. This country has generally been the place that the wealthy in other countries went to when their tax rates got too insane. If it can happen to another country, it can happen to the United States too, just like it's happening to New York. The people with means can get up and go, and they can take their businesses and their jobs with them.
JD, we've got a nice big audience for you here this morning. They must like what you're saying, even though it's kind of black pill, JD, because you kind of conclude that a deliberate, politically negotiated solution is not coming. You think that the problems of our budget are going to be fixed by raw necessity, essentially a crisis. That's a pretty dark conclusion, JD. Is there any political scenario which we could actually address this, or are we past that point?
Well, can I imagine one? Sure. But the CRFB calls for in their paper bipartisan solutions in Congress where they consider their spending policy, their tax policy, short-term borrowing solutions for the next crisis. We look at our Congress. Any extension of it, no matter who wins in the coming midterms, can we really imagine a bipartisan Congress sitting down and saying, you know what, we really maybe spend too much? And we really maybe have borrowed too much, and maybe we need to put the government on a diet, and they're talking about tax policy. I have a very hard time imagining that. Now, it can happen. The mechanisms are there. Congress could wake up tomorrow morning entirely altered, taken over as pod people or something like that, and do what the CRFB recommends. The next problem with that is that one of the things they recommend that they say has to be looked at, which is tax increases. It's an idea that is a non-starter. First of all, as we noted before, tax revenues have already been rising faster than inflation. Spending has been increasing faster than tax revenues have been rising, meaning that we do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And as the Congressional Budget Office has noted, every dollar of taxes have increased actually has an add-on cost to the economy of 20 cents to 60 cents higher than the dollar increase in revenue, meaning that you burden the economy much more than the apparent cost of the taxes. You do damage to the economy. You slow things down. You make it harder to be prosperous. So raising taxes at this point, is first of all just going to feed the spending machine, and second of all, it's going to further burden the economy. So that's why I come out kind of on the pessimistic side and say that solutions will be forced on the country.
Okay, well, I hope that you're wrong about that, but it's just sadly it seems as if that does seem to be the direction we're heading in. My thing from this, from like a tactical political perspective, I don't think if it happened today, I don't think we'd be ready for it. But you and I know full well that in every crisis is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity that right-wing nationalists or conservatives, perhaps, I don't know, they're kind of on the back burner these days to the MAGA populists, but on the left, they're ready for the crisis and they've got something ready to go afterwards. Are libertarians ready for the day that the financial economic collapse comes? Do we have a Millet waiting in the wings, JD? Or are we not prepared to handle the transition?
The odd thing is that libertarians as individuals are probably the best prepared because we've contemplated this sort of thing forever. But as a movement, we're the worst prepared because we're like, we joke about it. We're like herding cats. We're the worst organized, political group that there is. So no, I don't know of any Malay waiting in their wings. I don't see that we have our act together to take advantage of the situation, to rise to the occasion, to offer the solutions. We have the ideas. And I think as individuals, we'll weather it probably pretty well because we tend to be most pessimistic about the government's prospects and about the economy's prospects, and individually prepared for the worst. But organizationally, we're not so well prepared.
Sorry, sad to see. So let's switch to your self-defense piece. Last Thursday, we had 2 terror attacks in the same day: Temple, Israel, and Michigan. Then Old Dominion University in Virginia. Both were stopped by people on the scene, not by police who arrived after. So what's the argument that those 2 incidents in the same day do not settle the self-defense debate?
Well, I mean, I think they settled the self-defense debate, but they settled it in the idea that you have to be ready to defend yourself. We've seen multiple situations over the years, multiple attacks that were resolved by somebody at the scene. Including that incident a few years ago at a mall in Indiana, where a fellow made actually very impressive handgun shots at range and stopped a would-be mass killer. But this was 2 in one day, where on the scene, the security guards at Temple, Israel, stopped an attacker who drove his vehicle, his truck, into Temple, Israel. It was loaded with incendiaries. He was armed to bear to attack, what was at that point in time of the day, a school full of kids. They put an end to him right there. He was stuck in the truck. He was under fire, and he shot himself when his truck was in flame. At Old Dominion University, the attacker killed the instructor in the classroom, the Army Lieutenant Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Shah, and then the students jumped on him and stabbed him to death. In both situations, people on the scene responded, and the police showed up after the fact, but they're not there. They're not guarding us when an incident happens. The people being attacked are the ones who have to respond in the moment because they're the ones who are there in the moment. And I think that having those 2 incidents in one day just underlines that point tremendously. It makes sense to me. I have a concealed carry permit. I take my responsibility seriously. I volunteer as a security guard for my wife's synagogue. So this kind of hit home. You can bet I was talking with the rabbi immediately afterwards. We already had more training sessions planned, and we actually firmed those up yesterday via WhatsApp meeting. We're going to be training in more pistolcraft and use of rifles to deal with an active shooter situation, because we take seriously our responsibility to defend the congregation and ourselves before the police are able to arrive.
All right, so that's not abstract policy analysis. You're making real decisions about your family's safety. Seeing these attacks on Jewish community centers, Jewish schools like that, did that sort of up any timelines for you? Do you see an increase in violence against people who have that particular faith?
Yeah, the country has gotten spicy overall in recent years. We know that political violence is on the rise overall. But there's been a surge in anti-Semitism. It's entrenched on the progressive left, and we're seeing the Groyper right rising now. And the progressive left frames it as anti-Zionism. The Groyper right revives old memes, old tropes of traditional anti-Semitism. But either way, they're targeting Jews. I mentioned, my wife is Jewish, my son is half Jewish, so not that they're going to distinguish once they start reviving ancient hatreds and acting it out the way they always get acted out. So I'm very concerned. Jews are being targeted now again. And the thing is, the U.S. is in better shape than any other country outside of Israel for Jews, and it's still a place where Jews are concerned. People who are Jewish ought to be and are purchasing firearms, getting training, armoring up their synagogues and their schools, and acting in ways that they've had to act in the past because they've traditionally been a group that is targeted disproportionately, and that they thought they'd been spared from that kind of concern for a number of decades because the U.S. Seemed to be an exception. Well, maybe it's not so much of an exception anymore. That doesn't mean that Jews are the only people who have to be concerned, of course. I mean, other people have been targeted. Charlie Kirk was assassinated in September. Conservatives have been targeted. We had a couple of Democrats were assassinated in Minnesota last summer. But if if you're looking at history, Jews have particular reason to be concerned. Anti-Semitism is on the rise across the political spectrum, and they tend to get it in the teeth every time something like this happens.
JD, one last thing I wanted to discuss with you before we let you go. I remember the time in 2016 I was running for president. I got interviewed by all the top guys over there at Reason.com, but one of the people stood out to me more than any for his brilliance, his inquisitive mind, his thoroughness, his willingness to do fact checking on some of the mundane details of the conversations that we were having. A journalist who I had a tremendous amount of respect for, your colleague, Brian Doherty, who tragically passed away this last week in San Francisco. I just wanted to invite you to share a little bit about him and talk about Brian Doherty, because not a lot of people know who he is, but he authored the book Radicals for Capitalism, which had a major impact on me in my young libertarian days. Would you like to talk a little bit about Brian Doherty and give him a good send-off?
Yeah, absolutely. Brian Doherty was, I talked to Catherine Mangue-Ward, who's the editor-in-chief of Reason, earlier this week, and we talked about Brian. And as she said, he was just the most excellent weirdo. I mean, he was a great guy, a contemporary of mine. We're almost exactly the same age. And so, it hits home when a contemporary passes away, and this was especially untimely. I mean, this is not him expiring in his sleep. He was at an arts event in San Francisco, and he appears to have slipped and fallen from a cliff when he wandered away from the event. Just kind of awful. But the guy was the modern documenter of the libertarian movement, Radicals for Capitalism. But he'd written so many other books too. I mean, he kind of was the chronicler of the political movement. He was wonderfully engaged. He was the kind of guy who had a full life. As you can say, he participated in the art scene in San Francisco. He was, he was a regular attendee at Burning Man, and he was there to chronicle libertarians from across, of all different stripes, who barely spoke to each other, but would speak to him so that he can get the full history of what was going on. So his death was just a terrible loss to us as individuals. I knew him personally, but also a terrible loss to the libertarian movement, and he will be terribly missed.
Yeah, he will. I definitely love reading his pieces, and I'm glad that you're here with us. JD Tuccilli doing a great job over there. Brian Doherty, born in 1968, passed away in 2026. JD, thank you very much for the warm send-off, and thank you for all your great work that you do at Reason Magazine. Stick around with us, bud, because we definitely need your voice more than ever. Hope you have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. That's JD Tuccilli. Make sure you follow him over on X at JD_Tuccilli and subscribe to The Rattler. Of course, I read it as well every week. Thank you guys so much for all that you've done to support the Wake Up America show. Looks like we didn't hit the bonus content unless somebody has gone over to forlibertyshop.com and is about to make a big purchase. So we didn't get there today, but we'll save it for tomorrow. Actually, wait a minute. No, we won't, because I forgot. You won't see me tomorrow. I'm taking the day off. No Wake Up America show tomorrow. No Freedom Arcade tomorrow. I am out of office. Need a day off, but I will be back on Monday. Don't forget, guys, you got plenty of content coming out. You've got Cafecito Libre today, starring Mylene Salabaria. You've also got Culturama tonight, starring Daniela Pensack. So make sure that you guys are following all the shows. If you need to find all the show pages, they're all over on our website, wakeupamericashow.com. Thanks so much for everybody hanging out with us this morning. Good numbers on the audience. Don't forget to click the like button. If today was your first time watching and you enjoyed the show, click the follow button as well. And we'll see you guys right back again here on Monday on the Wake Up America show and the For Liberty Network.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.